The other day I began to unfold for you a set of circumstances in which a whole series of amazing things happened, and I gave you some of the background, and it included in that the fact that I'd been praying for some years for this red car. And when I began to do that as a Salvation Army officer, our salary was meagre, really, in those days, and because I remained a Salvation Army officer another 3 years or 4 years, and so I was in a circumstance where to obtain that kind of vehicle, you really did need the hand of the Lord. Ultimately, I became the pastor of peace. And once we're in this church and the church was growing, there came a time, it didn't take long, that we needed to extend the building, and we did that. But then there was a clear vision from the Lord to buy land. And he said, buy big land. And we did. We bought 25 acres right here in the central North Rockhampton. And we began to build, and it was a 2-year project with the selling of the other building, the raising of funds, and the setting up of this new multi-million-dollar building. And I was pretty hands-on with all of that in those days. And I developed the habit, where this church was being built, was in the growth corridor of Rockhampton, and today Rockhampton's grown right past it. And so it's in the middle now, but it was kind of on the edge, but on the one edge that was growing in those days. And right behind the church was a slope that ran up to a hill. And I developed the habit of going up to the top of this hill because from there you could see all over the city. It got quite steep, and it was pretty rough, boulders and grass as the further it went up. It took about 40 minutes to get up there. And so I used to go up there and sometimes sit half a day, sometimes a day, and pray. And anyway, all through this period of these 4 years and more, I'd been regularly thanking the Lord for that car. He had heard my prayer. All the things I'd ever learned about how to get prayer answered, I employed. Describing it, Father, I asked for a red 4-wheel drive, 7-seat Pajero. I thank you that you heard my prayer. Lord, only you could provide this for me, but I'm trusting because that's our family need, and so on and so forth. No, keep just believing God. You will do this. Anyway, in the meantime, a whole lot of things were happening, and here I was in the middle of a building program, but very conscious our family was growing. We had 5 kids, and 6 was on the way, and more were probably coming, and we were doing this because this is what the Lord gave us to do. And I was conscious of this need for a bigger house, bigger car, bigger boat too, I'd said to the Lord. As I was going up the back of this block this day, heading up for the slope, it got steeper and steeper as you went, I came across this piece of land. Now, I had heard, it was a 10-acre block, I'd heard that it had been repossessed and was for sale, and it was a very economical sale. And as I walk across it, I realised, you could build a house here, a beautiful view of the city. You could even put in a pool or anything you wanted, 10 acres. And I prayed, I stopped and prayed and asked the Lord. I said, Lord, can I buy this block and build my house here? And he said, no, this is not for you. He said, finish building the church first, and after that, we will build your house. Oh, I like the sound of that we will build your house. So I was at peace about that. And it took another year or two to finish building the church. Well, it was about 2 years before I came one day. The church was well finished. We were set up inside. And I came to the point where I just realised, the time has come. And that's where my house story begins. I'll come back to it in a moment. Meanwhile, the car story, because these two things went side by side. I said we had to raise funds for that building, and we did, and we needed to raise serious funds. This was a $3.5 million building project. We sold the old church for $650,000. We had a little bit of cash in the bank, but we had to raise serious money. And I didn't know what to do. I'd bought the land, a lot of things we'd put in place, but then I was stuck. I stayed up till midnight one night seeking the Lord. What do I do? Because I just did not know what to do, didn't know how to move. And during the night, the Lord sat on me a word, just one big word. And I was conscious of it all night, even though I was fast asleep. But when I woke up the next morning, there was this word sitting on me. It was a name. And I'm trying to work out, where have I heard that name? And I finally realised it was the name of a fundraising organization. And this was an organization from Texas that specialised in raising money for universities, schools, churches from within their own constituents for capital projects, for building projects, special purpose fundraising. And of course it's expensive to go this route, but the Lord, He set this word on me big. So I called them and they came, and yes, it was an expensive fee to have this happen, but they do an analysis and they told us what we were capable of raising, and it was a considerable sum. But it meant a 4.5-month program of presenting the opportunity to the church, inviting people to really consider the making of sacrificial gifts. And of course, very early in the piece, you're the leader, you're the senior leader, you've got to make your sacrificial gift, and you've got to be an example to others. And I looked at my budget, basic pastor salary, that's all we had. And I was thinking to myself, along with our other giving, our tithing, our giving to missions and a mob of kids and Christian schooling, I thought, well, if we really sacrifice, if we really give up our slack, so to speak, I thought $50 a week. But when I prayed, the Lord said $20,000. I did my sums. $20,000 was more than $120 a week. And I just thought, it's impossible. I couldn't have heard the Lord. And a week or two goes past and I come to it again thinking $50 is all I can afford. I asked the Lord, and for a second time He said $20,000. Again, I didn't think it could have been the Lord. Just not possible. So I put it on the shelf for another week or two. And the third time I came back to the Lord and asked the Lord, what was I meant to commit to this program? And He said $20,000. So this time I took it seriously. I sat down with the budget and thought, what could we do to free up $120 a week? And I worked out that if we went without holidays, if we went without a whole lot of fancy things, if Hazel went without perms and had a plain hairstyle, it sounds awful, but if we gave up everything we could give up, that yes, we could just manage and, live very basic for 3 years. That was the period of the pledge. And so we made the pledge. We signed for $20,000. And we began to give it at $121 something a week, whatever was required. And we went on in that fundraising campaign to raise $1.14 million towards that building. In fact, we built the whole building with only a very minor bank loan left. But meanwhile, this is the interesting thing about the car. I'd kind of long forgotten about the car. Life had got busy, building programs and growing congregation and all the rest of it. And so it wasn't exactly on my radar at the time. Occasional prayer, but there were too many things to think about and pray about. And yet I had prayed about that for a lot of years, and the Lord never forgets. And by this time, we had 5 kids in the family, and after I'd signed the pledge, this is the strange thing, I had worked out that we'd only be able to meet that pledge with the greatest sacrifice of every convenience, every luxury, cut right back to the most basic living. After we signed the pledge and began to give that money, the Lord took me. Now, I describe it here as, He took me by the scruff of the neck. He got a hold of me and frog marched me down to the car dealer. Except He took me to the Nissan dealer, not the Mitsubishi dealer. So I felt like I was taken by the Lord and planted there, and here inside the showroom, they had lots of cars outside, but here inside this glass showroom, right in the center of the floor and in the center of other cars, was this big, brand new, shiny, red, 4-wheel drive, 7-seat Nissan Patrol. And the Lord said, buy it. So I did what the Lord said. And I signed, we had no cash, I signed for a loan to pay that red 7-seat 4-wheel drive Nissan Patrol off over 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever the standard period was in those days. And I realized why the Lord had taken me to a Nissan Patrol and not to a Mitsubishi Pajero. I realized around that time that the seating, they're both 7 seats, but the seating configuration was such that now that we had a 5th child, we needed this other seating configuration, not that one. It's amazing how the Lord can go ahead of you, and even when you've got it figured out, he's got it figured out a whole lot better than you do. And so he took me to that car and he said, buy it. He had no intention of giving me the cash up front. He had no intention of someone else coming along and paying it for me. And yet here was a situation which I thought I had no free income whatsoever. And here's the interesting and good news. We never missed the money. We never missed a beat. I paid all those car payments. I paid all the pledge payments. Hazel never went without fancy hairdressing. We never went without a holiday. We never went without anything. In that whole 3 years that I had devoted every last skerrick that I could imagine in our budget to the Lord's purpose, he provided it. I don't even know how he did it. I'm not aware that we had any extra income, but we paid for all of those things.